The night was unusually calm, almost too quiet. Stars twinkled in the vast expanse of the sky as if they were holding their breath, waiting for something extraordinary to happen. People around the world went about their usual routines, watching TV, scrolling through social media, or tucking their children into bed. But none of them could have predicted what was about to unfold. High above Earth's atmosphere, something strange began to stir. Astronomers stationed at observatories across the globe noticed it first. Strange flashes of light appeared in deep space, flickering like fireflies but far more intense. At first, they thought it might be a glitch in their equipment. After all, such phenomena weren't uncommon when dealing with highly sensitive telescopes. But as hours passed, the lights grew brighter and closer, moving steadily toward Earth. Panic set in among scientists who couldn't explain what they were seeing. These weren't meteors, comets, or any known celestial bodies. They were something else entirely. By midnight, the entire world knew something was amiss. News channels interrupted regular programming with urgent updates. Social media exploded, with theories ranging from natural cosmic events to alien invasions. Governments scrambled to prepare statements while military forces were placed on high alert. No one understood what was happening, but everyone agreed it wasn't good. And then, just as dawn broke over the horizon, the sky itself seemed to split apart. It wasn't literal, of course, but that's how people described it later. A massive rift opened up in the heavens, glowing with an otherworldly light. From this tier emerged enormous ships unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They were colossal, each one larger than a city, their metallic surfaces gleaming ominously under the sun's rays. Some hovered silently in orbit, while others descended lower, casting shadows over cities and towns below. The sight sent shockwaves through every corner of the planet. Parents pulled their children close, fearing the worst. Soldiers gripped their weapons tightly, ready to defend their homelands against whatever threat these visitors posed. Scientists frantically tried to communicate, sending radio signals and laser beams into space in hopes of making contact. Yet despite their efforts, there was no response. The ship simply loomed overhead, silent and unyielding. Amidst the chaos, miles away from the bustling cities and panicked crowds, an elderly woman named Margaret shuffled into a small diner located at the edge of a sleepy little town. Her steps were slow and deliberate, her frail frame leaning heavily on a wooden cane. She wore a faded coat that had seen better days, its fabric worn thin from years of use. Despite her age and obvious weariness, there was a quiet dignity about her, a strength that suggested she'd lived through hardships before. Margaret settled into a booth near the window, ordering a cup of black coffee from the young waitress, behind the counter. She didn't say much, content to sit quietly and watch the commotion outside. Cars sped by on the nearby road, horns blaring as drivers argued over traffic delays caused by emergency vehicles rushing to undisclosed locations. Pedestrians gathered on street corners, pointing skyward and snapping photos of the alien ships with their phones. Everyone seemed consumed by fear and curiosity, desperate to understand what was happening. When the waitress returned with Margaret's coffee, she handed over the bill without so much as a smile. "That'll be $5, she said curtly, barely glancing at the old woman. Margaret reached into her purse, pulling out a crumpled bill to pay. But before she could hand it over, the waitress frowned. "We don't serve people like you. Here," she muttered loud enough for Margaret to hear. The word stung, though Margaret didn't let it show. Instead, she nodded slowly, gathering her belongings and standing up with as much grace as her aging body allowed. As she walked out of the diner, she caught a glimpse of herself in the glass door. Wrinkles lined her face, her hair streaked with gray. To most people, she probably looked like just another lonely old woman, someone easily forgotten. What they didn't know, and what the rude waitress certainly didn't realize, was that Margaret wasn't just anyone. In fact, she had ties to the very diner where she'd been turned away. Decades ago, long before the current staff was even born, Margaret and her late husband had built that diner from scratch. It had started as nothing more than a dream, a cozy place where locals could gather to share meals and stories. Together, they poured their hearts into the project, working tirelessly to create something special. Over time, the diner became a beloved fixture in the community, attracting customers from neighboring towns. Even after her husband passed away, Margaret continued running the business until her son inherited it. He modernized the place, adding sleek furniture and digital menus, but in doing so, he also distanced himself from his mother. Now, years later, Margaret rarely visited the diner, and when she did, no one recognized her, not even the staff she once trained personally. As Margaret stepped back onto the sidewalk, clutching her cane tightly, she glanced upward at the alien ships dominating the sky. A faint smile crossed her lips, though it held little warmth. Most people saw those vessels as harbingers of doom, proof that humanity was powerless against superior forces. But Margaret saw something different. To her, the arrival of these extraterrestrial visitors felt almost predictable, like pieces falling into place after years of careful planning. Unbeknownst to the rest of the world, Margaret knew more about the situation than anyone else. While governments debated strategies and scientists scrambled for answers, she already had a plan. Years of hard work, sacrifice, and secrecy had led to this moment. And though she hadn't expected the aliens to arrive quite so soon, she was prepared nonetheless. For now, however, she kept her secrets to herself. Walking slowly down the deserted street, Margaret disappeared into the shadows, her mind racing with thoughts of what came next. Whatever happened, one thing was certain: the world would never be the same again. Margaret walked slowly back to her modest home, the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders, not just figuratively, but literally. Her cane tapped rhythmically against the pavement as she navigated the quiet streets of the small town. The alien ships loomed overhead, casting long shadows that stretched across rooftops and sidewalks. People huddled together in groups, whispering anxiously about what these visitors might want. Some speculated they were here to conquer Earth. Others hoped they'd come in peace. But Margaret didn't need to guess. She already knew far more than anyone else. When she finally reached her house, a tiny cottage nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac, Margaret closed the door behind her with a soft click. Inside, the air was warm and familiar, filled with the scent of old books and lavender. Candles. She hung up her coat carefully, then shuffled into the living room where a stack of dusty photo albums lay waiting on the coffee table. For years, she'd avoided looking through them, unwilling to stir up painful memories. But tonight, something compelled her to open one. The first album was filled with pictures from happier times, her wedding day, holidays spent with family, and countless snapshots of the diner she and her late husband had built together. There was a photo of the two of them standing proudly outside the newly constructed building, holding hands and smiling brightly. Another showed Margaret serving customers during the diner's grand opening, her apron covered in flour from baking pies all morning. Each image brought back vivid memories, making her heart ache with longing for days gone by. As she flipped through the pages, Margaret paused at a picture of her son James as a child. He stood beside her in the kitchen, his face smeared with chocolate from sneaking bites of dessert before dinner. Back then, he'd been such a sweet boy, always eager to help out around the diner. Together, they'd dreamed of turning it into something truly special, a place where people could feel at home no matter what life threw their way. Those dreams had come true, though not exactly how Margaret had envisioned. After her husband passed away, running the diner became too much for Margaret to handle alone. So when James finished college and expressed interest in taking over the business, she handed him the reins without hesitation. At first, things went smoothly. James worked hard to modernize the diner, updating the menu, redesigning the interior, and even adding Wi-Fi for customers who wanted to work while they ate. It quickly became popular among younger crowds, drawing in new patrons every day. But as the diner grew busier, James grew distant. He stopped visiting Margaret at home, claiming he was too busy managing the business. Over time, their relationship deteriorated until they barely spoke at all. Margaret sighed deeply, closing the album and setting it aside. She didn't resent James for moving on. It was natural for children to forge their own paths, but sometimes she wished he hadn't forgotten where those paths began. The diner had been her life's work, a testament to everything she and her husband had achieved together. Now it felt like a stranger's property, a relic of someone else's success story. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of breaking news blaring from the television. Margaret turned it on earlier to keep track of updates about the alien ships, but now reporters were talking about something entirely different. Military jets streaked across the sky, attempting to intercept the mysterious vessels. Missiles launched from bases around the globe, aimed directly at the invaders. Yet none of the attacks worked. Every weapon humanity threw at the aliens bounced, harmlessly off invisible shields surrounding their ships. Governments scrambled to regroup, issuing frantic statements urging calm while secretly preparing for the worst. Margaret watched the chaos unfold with a detached expression, sipping her lukewarm coffee. Unlike most people glued to their screens, in terror she wasn't surprised by any of it. She'd seen this exact scenario play out in her mind countless times over the years. What did surprise her, however, was the sudden message that appeared on screen shortly after the failed military strikes. "Attention, citizens of Earth," a robotic voice announced. "Cease your aggression immediately. We mean you no harm." The Noma transmission came not from the alien ships but from somewhere on Earth itself. Whoever sent it spoke with authority, commanding respect even as global leaders struggled to verify its source. Speculation ran rampant. Was it a rogue scientist, a secret government agency, or perhaps an eccentric billionaire playing hero? No one knew for sure, but one thing was clear. The sender claimed responsibility for constructing massive starships hidden beneath the planet's surface. Dubbed Star Destroyers, these machines were said to possess technology capable of matching, or even surpassing, that of the extraterrestrial visitors. News anchors repeated the term over and over again, trying to make sense of the revelation. Star Destroyers. The name alone inspired awe and fear in equal measure. If true, it meant humanity wasn't as defenseless as everyone believed. Someone had been planning for this moment for years, anticipating the arrival of beings from another world. And whoever they were, they clearly had resources beyond imagination. As the broadcast continued, Margaret leaned back in her chair, chuckling softly under her breath. To her, the idea of Earth possessing advanced weaponry wasn't far-fetched, at all. In fact, she found it almost amusing how shocked everyone seemed. After all, she knew exactly where those Star Destroyers came from and why they existed in the first place. Years ago, long before the alien ships arrived, Margaret and her late husband had stumbled upon groundbreaking discoveries during their experiments with electromagnetic fields. They'd been tinkering with energy sources in their basement workshop, hoping to create sustainable power solutions for the diner. Instead, they uncovered principles that defied conventional physics. Their findings suggested it was possible to manipulate gravity, bend light, and generate impenetrable force fields, all concepts straight out of science fiction novels. At first, they thought they were onto something revolutionary. They wrote papers, submitted proposals, and presented their research at conferences. But instead of acclaim, they faced ridicule. Other scientists dismissed their work as pseudoscience, accusing them of fabricating data to gain attention. Frustrated but undeterred, Margaret and her husband decided to continue their experiments in secret. Using funds from the diner and private investments, they built a hidden facility deep underground where they could pursue their vision without interference. It took decades of trial and error, setbacks and breakthroughs, but eventually they succeeded. Beneath the diner's foundation lay a labyrinth of tunnels leading to a massive hangar housing several Star Destroyers. These ships weren't just prototypes. They were fully functional war machines designed specifically to protect Earth from threats both terrestrial and extraterrestrial. Margaret and her husband called them Project Sentinel, a nod to their role as guardians of humanity's future. Unfortunately, her husband never lived to see the project completed. He passed away unexpectedly during the final stages of construction, leaving Margaret to finish the task alone. Determined to honor his memory, she poured every ounce of energy into perfecting the Star Destroyers. By the time they were operational, she'd become something of a recluse, retreating from public life to focus solely on maintaining the fleet. Now, as the world marveled at the existence of these incredible machines, Margaret felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. Pride because her hard work had paid off, proving naysayers wrong once and for all. Sadness because no one, including her own son, understood the sacrifices she'd made along the way. To the outside world, she was just an old woman living quietly in a small town. Few would ever suspect that beneath her humble exterior lay the brilliance of a genius who had single-handedly saved the planet. With a heavy sigh, Margaret turned off the TV and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges, new questions, and perhaps even recognition, if she chose to reveal herself. But for now, she needed rest. As she drifted off to sleep, images of her past danced in her mind. The diner bustling with happy customers, her husband's laughter echoing through the halls and her son's innocent smile as he helped bake pies in the kitchen. Through it all, one truth remained constant. Margaret had always been a fighter, determined to leave her mark on the world no matter the cost. Little did anyone know that Mark was about to change history forever. The next morning, the world woke up to a reality that felt more like science fiction than real life. The alien ship still hovered menacingly above Earth, their presence casting an ominous shadow over humanity's fragile existence. But now, there was hope, a glimmer of defiance sparked by the mysterious announcement about the Star Destroyers. People whispered about these hidden weapons with awe and disbelief, wondering how such advanced technology had been kept secret for so long. Governments scrambled to investigate the claim, deploying teams of scientists, engineers, and military personnel to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens debated endlessly online and offline, trying to piece together clues about who might be behind this incredible revelation. Margaret, however, remained quiet. She sat in her cozy living room, sipping tea as she listened to the news on the radio. Reporters speculated wildly about the identity of the person or organization responsible for creating the Star Destroyers. Some believed it was a rogue, billionaire with limitless resources. Others thought it might be a covert government operation conducted in absolute secrecy. A few conspiracy theorists even suggested extraterrestrial allies were helping humanity fight back against the invaders. Margaret chuckled softly at some of the wilder theories but said nothing. Let them guess, she thought. They'll find out, soon enough. What no one realized was that the answers lay right under their noses, or rather beneath their feet. Beneath the diner where Margaret once poured coffee and served meals, the Star Destroyers stood ready, gleaming with cutting-edge technology. Each ship was a marvel of engineering, designed not only to defend Earth but also to counteract any threat posed by the alien fleet. Their sleek exteriors housed powerful engines capable of traveling faster than light, while their weapon systems could neutralize even the most impenetrable shields. More importantly, the Star Destroyers were equipped with artificial intelligence programmed to adapt quickly to new challenges, ensuring they remained steps ahead of their adversaries. For years, Margaret had maintained the fleet herself, working tirelessly in the underground facility to ensure everything functioned perfectly. It wasn't easy, especially after losing her husband, but she refused to abandon the project. Every day she inspected the ships, tested their systems, and made adjustments as needed. She knew the stakes were high, and failure wasn't an option. Now, with the aliens looming overhead, her hard work was finally paying off. As global leaders convened emergency meetings to discuss the situation, Margaret received a call from an unexpected source. It was General Harris, a high-ranking officer in the United States military. His voice was calm yet urgent as he spoke. "Mrs. Margaret," he began, "we need your help." Margaret raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "My help? Whatever. For?" she asked innocently. "We've traced the origin of the Star Destroyers to your property," the general explained. "We believe you know something about them, or perhaps someone connected to them. If you have information, now is the time to share it." Margaret hesitated for a moment, weighing her options. She could continue playing dumb, letting the authorities dig deeper until they uncovered the truth themselves. Or she could step forward and reveal her role in the project, taking control of the narrative before someone else did. After a brief pause, she made her decision. All right, General, she said firmly. I'll tell you what I know, but you'll need to come here in person. This isn't something I can explain over the phone. Within hours, a convoy of military vehicles arrived at Margaret's modest home. Soldiers clad in tactical gear surrounded the property, securing the area while officers knocked politely on her front door. When Margaret answered, she greeted them with a warm smile, inviting them inside as if hosting old friends. Please make yourselves comfortable, she said, gesturing toward the living room. Would anyone care for tea? The soldiers exchanged puzzled glances, clearly unprepared for such hospitality. General Harris stepped forward, his expression serious. Thank you, Mrs. Margaret, but we're here on urgent business. We need to understand what's happening beneath your property and why the Star Destroyers are there. Margaret nodded slowly, her demeanor shifting from friendly host to commanding leader. Very well, she said. Follow me. She led the group through the house and into the basement, where a concealed door blended seamlessly with the wall. Pulling a lever hidden behind a bookshelf, she revealed a staircase descending into darkness. The soldiers followed cautiously, their flashlights illuminating the narrow passageway. At the bottom, they emerged into a massive hangar filled with towering Star Destroyers, their metallic surfaces gleaming under fluorescent lights. Gasps of astonishment echoed through the chamber as the soldiers took in the sight. Even General Harris, a seasoned veteran accustomed to extraordinary situations, struggled to contain his shock. This is incredible, he stammered, turning to Margaret. You built all of this? I didn't do it alone. Margaret replied simply. My late husband and I started the project years ago. After he passed, I finished it myself. These ships were designed to protect Earth from threats like the ones currently hovering above us. The general nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. With your permission, we'd like to deploy the Star Destroyers immediately. Time is critical. Margaret crossed her arms, studying him carefully. Deploy them? That's not how this works. These ships aren't toys to be handed over blindly. If you want to use them, you'll have to follow my rules and trust me when I say I won't tolerate reckless decisions. General Harris hesitated, then nodded again. Understood. What do you propose? Margaret smiled faintly, her eyes narrowing with determination. First, we establish communication with the aliens. If they're truly peaceful, we'll negotiate terms. If not... Her voice trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. Let's just say the Star Destroyers will send a clear message. Over the next several hours, Margaret worked closely with military officials to coordinate a plan. Using the advanced communication systems aboard the Star Destroyers, they broadcast a message directly to the alien fleet. To the visitors above our planet, the transmission began. We acknowledge your presence and request clarification of your intentions. Be warned, further aggression will not go unanswered. The response came almost instantly. A holographic figure appeared on screen, its form shimmering with an ethereal glow. Its voice resonated deeply, carrying both authority and curiosity. Earthlings, we mean no harm. We seek knowledge and resources to sustain our journey across the stars. However, we will defend ourselves if provoked. Margaret leaned forward, scrutinizing the alien's words. Knowledge and resources, she murmured thoughtfully. Turning to General Harris, she whispered, They're desperate. That makes them dangerous and predictable. With careful precision, Margaret instructed the Star Destroyers to move into position, positioning themselves between the alien ships and Earth's surface. The vessel's engines roared to life, their sheer power rattling the ground below. For the first time since their arrival, the aliens showed signs of uncertainty. Their once confident formations faltered slightly, betraying hints of fear. Meanwhile, news of the Star Destroyers spread rapidly across the globe. Journalists flocked to the small town, eager to uncover the truth behind the mysterious fleet. Reporters camped outside Margaret's home, snapping photos and conducting interviews with neighbors. Many recalled her connection to the diner, speculating whether she might somehow be involved in the unfolding drama. Others dismissed her as irrelevant, focusing instead on rumors about shadowy organizations or tech billionaires. Back at the diner, Staff members watched the coverage with growing unease. The rude waitress who had turned Margaret away days earlier felt a pang of guilt as reporters mentioned the elderly woman's name repeatedly. Could it really be her? Was the frail old lady everyone underestimated actually the mastermind behind Earth's salvation? By evening, the tension reached its peak. The Star Destroyers floated silently in orbit, their presence serving as both shield and warning. The aliens, realizing they were outmatched, began retreating slowly toward the edge of Earth's atmosphere. As their ships disappeared into the void, cheers erupted around the world. Humanity had triumphed, not through brute force but through ingenuity and courage. Margaret watched the celebrations unfold on television, her expression unreadable. She felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, and a tinge of sadness. Relief because the immediate danger had passed, pride because her lifelong dream had finally come true, and sadness because she knew the battle was far from over. The universe was vast and unpredictable, full of wonders and threats alike. Today's victory was merely a stepping stone, a reminder that preparation and perseverance could overcome even the greatest odds. As the night wore on, Margaret retreated to her bedroom, closing the door behind her. She gazed out the window, at the starry sky, her thoughts drifting to her late husband. "We did it," she whispered softly. "Just like we always planned." Somewhere she hoped he was smiling down at her, proud of everything they'd achieved together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and perhaps even new enemies. But for now, Margaret allowed herself a moment of peace. She had saved the world, and in doing so, proven that even the smallest among. The days following the aliens' retreat were a whirlwind of activity. News outlets around the world couldn't stop talking about the Star Destroyers and the mysterious figure who had saved humanity from certain doom. Reporters dug tirelessly into every possible lead, desperate to uncover the identity of the person, or people, behind Earth's newfound defense system. Speculation ran rampant, with theories ranging from secret government programs to rogue scientists working in isolation. Yet despite all their efforts, no one seemed closer to solving the mystery. Meanwhile, Margaret remained quiet, watching the chaos unfold from the comfort of her modest home. She knew it was only a matter of time before someone connected the dots. After all, the Star Destroyers were hidden beneath the diner she once owned, a fact that wouldn't stay buried forever. And sure enough, within days, journalists began flocking to the small town where Margaret lived, drawn by whispers of her connection to the diner and its original owners. One particularly persistent reporter named Sarah decided to investigate further. Unlike her peers who focused on flashy headlines and wild conjectures, Sarah believed in taking a more methodical approach. She spent hours interviewing locals, poring over old records, and piecing together fragments of information. Eventually, her trail led her to Margaret's doorstep. Margaret opened the door cautiously, her cane resting against the frame as she peered at the young woman standing outside. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. Sarah smiled warmly, holding up her notebook. "Hi, Mrs. Margaret. My name is Sarah. I'm a journalist writing about the Star Destroyers and their origins. I was hoping we could talk." For a moment, Margaret considered turning her away. She had spent decades keeping her secrets hidden, shielding herself and the project from prying eyes. But something about Sarah's earnest expression gave her pause. Perhaps it was time to share the truth, not just with the world, but with herself. With a soft sigh, Margaret nodded. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Inside, Sarah marveled at the cozy yet unassuming interior of Margaret's home. Photos lined the walls, capturing moments from a life well lived. There were pictures of Margaret and her late husband standing proudly beside the diner, snapshots of family gatherings, and even a faded image of James as a child, grinning ear to ear. It was clear that this woman had stories to tell, and Sarah was determined to hear them. They settled into the living room where Margaret poured 2 cups of tea. For several minutes they exchanged pleasantries, building a rapport before diving into heavier topics. Finally, Sarah leaned forward, her pen poised over her notebook. "Mrs. Margaret, Can you tell me anything about the Star Destroyers? People are saying they might be linked to your property. Margaret took a slow sip of tea, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was steady and measured. What do you know about my past, Sarah? Caught off guard by the question, Sarah hesitated. Well, I've heard that you used to own the diner down the street. Some people say you and your husband built it yourselves. Beyond that, details are scarce. Margaret nodded, unsurprised. That's because most people don't bother asking the right questions. Let me start from the beginning. She launched into her story, recounting the early days when she and her husband first dreamed of creating something meaningful. They started small, pouring their savings into a tiny diner that quickly became a beloved fixture in the community. Over time, they expanded the business, investing profits into improvements and innovations. But their ambitions didn't stop there. Inspired by their love for science and discovery, they began experimenting with electromagnetic fields in a makeshift workshop beneath the diner. At first, we thought we were onto something revolutionary, Margaret explained. Our experiments showed promise. Things like bending light, manipulating gravity, and generating force fields. We wrote papers, submitted proposals, and tried to share our findings with the scientific community. But instead of support, we faced ridicule. Other researchers called us frauds, accusing us of fabricating data to gain attention. Sarah listened intently, scribbling notes as Margaret continued. So we decided to keep working in secret. Using funds from the diner and private investments, we built an underground facility where we could pursue our vision without interference. It took years of trial and error, setbacks and breakthroughs, but eventually, we succeeded. Beneath the diner lies a labyrinth of tunnels leading to a massive hangar housing several Star Destroyers. These ships weren't just prototypes. They were fully functional war machines designed specifically to protect Earth from threats both terrestrial and extraterrestrial. Her voice softened as she spoke of her husband's passing. He never got to see the project completed. He passed away unexpectedly during the final stages of construction. Afterward, I finished the task alone, determined to honor his memory. For years, I maintained the fleet myself, ensuring everything functioned perfectly. I knew the stakes were high and failure wasn't an option. By the time Margaret finished her story, Sarah was speechless. She stared at the elderly woman, in awe, struggling to reconcile the humble figure before her with the genius responsible for Earth's salvation. You mean, you're the one who built the Star Destroyers? You're the reason humanity survived? Margaret chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Yes, Sarah, that's exactly what I'm saying. News of Margaret's revelation spread like wildfire. Within hours, her face was plastered across every major news outlet, accompanied by headlines like, "Elderly Woman Saves Humanity from Alien Invasion," and "The Unlikely Hero Behind Earth's Star Destroyers." People around the world were astonished, not only by her incredible achievements but also by how long she had managed to keep them hidden. Back at the diner, staff members watched the coverage with growing guilt. The rude waitress who had turned Margaret away days earlier felt a deep pang of shame. How could they have treated her so poorly, not realizing she was the mother of the diner's owner, and now, a global hero? One by one, they approached James, apologizing profusely for their behavior and begging him to reach out to his mother. James, meanwhile, was reeling from the revelations. He hadn't spoken to Margaret in months, too consumed by work and personal struggles to maintain contact. Seeing her on television, hailed as a savior while he remained oblivious to her contributions, filled him with a mixum. The days that followed Margaret's revelation were a blur of activity. Reporters camped outside her modest home, eager to capture every word she spoke. Social media buzzed with admiration for the elderly woman who had single-handedly saved humanity. People everywhere marveled at her ingenuity, resilience, and humility. Yet, amidst the adoration, Margaret remained grounded, refusing to let fame or attention change who she was. For her, the real victory wasn't in being recognized. It was in knowing she had done what needed to be done. One afternoon, as Margaret, Sat on her porch sipping tea, she noticed a familiar figure approaching from down the street. It was James, her estranged son. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. He hesitated at the gate, clearly unsure whether he was welcome. Margaret watched him silently for a moment before beckoning him closer. "Come in," she said simply, her tone warm but firm. James stepped inside cautiously, his guilt written all over his face. "Mom," he began, his voice trembling. I don't even know where to start. I'm so sorry." Margaret studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. "Sorry for what exactly?" she asked gently. "For everything," James replied, tears welling up in his eyes. "For ignoring you, for forgetting where I came from, for not realizing how much you sacrificed. I didn't know, Mom. I swear if I'd known, you wouldn't have treated me differently." Margaret interrupted softly. "You were busy building your own life, just like I wanted you to. But somewhere along the way, you forgot the values we worked so hard to instill in you. Kindness, gratitude, remembering where you came from, all those things matter more than success." Her words hit James like a punch to the gut. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I've been such a fool," he muttered. "All this time I thought I was doing something great by modernizing the diner, making it successful. But I lost sight of what really mattered. You, our family, the legacy Dad and you created together." Margaret reached out, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's never too late to make amends," she said. "But it's not about me anymore. It's about what you choose to do next. You have an opportunity here to rebuild not just our relationship, but the community around us. To remind people that kindness and connection are more important than profit or prestige." James nodded slowly, wiping away his tears. "What should I do?" Margaret smiled faintly. "Start by reopening the diner, not as a business, but as a place where people can come together again. Call it Margaret's Legacy. Let it stand as a reminder of everything we've achieved and everything we still need to work toward." True to his word, James threw himself into reviving the diner. With Margaret's guidance, he transformed it into a welcoming space that celebrated its history while embracing the future. Old photographs lined the walls, chronicling the diner's journey from humble beginnings to global significance. The menu featured classic recipes alongside modern twists, honoring both tradition and innovation. And most importantly, the staff underwent rigorous training, not just in customer service but in treating everyone with dignity and respect. The grand reopening of Margaret's Legacy drew crowds from far and wide. Locals mingled with tourists, sharing stories and laughter over plates of homemade pie and steaming cups of coffee. Margaret herself attended the event, seated at a special booth reserved in her honor. As customers approached her to express their gratitude, she greeted each, one with a warm smile and heartfelt thanks. Though she preferred to stay out of the spotlight, she understood the importance of leading by example. Meanwhile, the Star Destroyers continued to serve as Earth's guardians, patrolling the skies and ensuring humanity's safety, under Margaret's supervision. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to improve their technology, preparing for any future threats. Governments around the world collaborated openly for the first time, pooling resources and knowledge to create a united front against cosmic dangers. The aliens who had once terrified the planet became a distant memory, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and unity. As weeks turned into months, Margaret found peace in the simple joys of everyday life. She spent mornings tending to her garden, afternoons visiting the diner, and evenings gazing at the stars through her telescope. Occasionally, reporters would stop by to interview her, but she always redirected their focus to bigger issues: climate change, poverty, education. Saving the world isn't just about fighting aliens, she told them. It's about taking care of each other, protecting our planet, and leaving something better for the next generation. Her wisdom resonated deeply with people, inspiring countless acts of kindness and compassion. Schools named scholarships after her. Charities adopted her philosophy of giving back, and communities rallied around causes she championed. Margaret may have started as an unlikely hero, but her impact rippled across the globe, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. Late one night, as Margaret sat alone on her porch, she reflected on everything that had happened. The alien invasion, the Star Destroyers, the revelations, all of it felt surreal, like chapters from someone else's story. Yet through it all she had stayed true to herself, guided by love, determination, and a belief in humanity's potential. A soft breeze rustled the leaves overhead, carrying with it the faint scent of lavender. Margaret closed her eyes, letting the calm wash over her. Somewhere beyond the stars, her late husband was surely smiling down at her, proud of everything they had accomplished together. And though the universe held mysteries yet to be uncovered, Margaret knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges lay ahead, humanity would rise to meet them, as long as they remembered to look out for each other. With that thought, she rose slowly from her chair, leaning on her cane for support. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new adventures, and perhaps even new discoveries. For now, however, she was content to live out her days surrounded by love, respect, and the aroma of fresh coffee brewing in her beloved diner. After all, sometimes the greatest victories aren't won on battlefields or among the stars. They're found in the quiet moments shared between hearts.